and then we'll be offering more. But I'm still putting them together because I haven't had a minute. Because besides everything else I'm doing, this year there are 2 adult B'nai Mitzvah groups because last year's got canceled. So we waited, but then I had to reteach, or so I've been teaching two groups every week, and their services are this Shabbat, 1 in the morning, afternoon.
Mazel tov.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Very nice.
Wow.
And a lot of prep and prayer and everything else, plus everything else we're doing. So,
well, speaking for one of those people who had a bat mitzvah as an adult at Bosher Boulevard Temple, it was such a wonderful experience that I'm glad that other people are continuing to do it.
Yeah, we had 7, but 2 already did it. So we have 5 in the morning and we have 8 in the afternoon.
Wow.
I would love to do that. Your class has been so great, Rabbi Nanus, and all of your classes, just the Holocaust, just everything. Wilshire Boulevard's the best.
Thank you.
Without a doubt.
So is anyone else going to turn on their cameras? Are you all like hiding this week? Nobody's.
I'm
Can I share a compliment I got?
Yes. Go ahead. Share a compliment.
Are you trying to make? Yes. I got a compliment from my friend who said, coming to your house for Seder is the best reason I know for being a Jew.
Oh, beautiful.
Isn't that great?
Oh, beautiful. Congratulations. I'm sure
That was
great.
Very special.
Susan?
Yes.
Thank you for your Shabbat letter. It was so special. It was really beautiful, beautiful.
It was amazing.
Susan, I tried to, it's Miriam. I tried to, Xerox it on a copy. I tried to copy it and I lost it and I can't get it again.
I'll mail it to you.
Boy, I'd appreciate it. I thought it was magnificent. I also answered you.
Oh, I didn't get your answers, but thank you. We'll have to see.
Oh.
Well, I mean,
I answered and I said how meaningful it was.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
It became a focal point of our Seder.
Oh, wow.
That's wow.
Thank you. So
for learning to read anything extra to Seder is pretty amazing. And he took it and decided that as far as he was concerned, you could forget the story and just read that. But he read that and everybody just sat there. It was totally quiet. It was amazing. The whole thing was incredible. Thank you.
Thank you. So speaking of thank you, let's say a blessing for being together as we begin to study something Jewish. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu
Shalom. Asher Kitsanu
B'Tzivanu Va'asok B'Divrei Torah. So this week is our last week, and it's interesting. We're going to talk about Lillian Wald, who is an unsung heroine, who's absolutely a magnificent woman who affected all of our lives. You will see how what her work did has affected us until today. And if we want to look at, just review the spectrum of women, we started with, Bruria, who was held back and was a brilliant scholar, but was, according to some commentaries, thwarted. And certainly, maybe she shone greater than some of the teachers, but she was respected, but then brought down by the male hierarchy, even if not in her day, certainly since then. If you look her up, they always tell that terrible story about how she was tricked into committing adultery and killed herself, which I don't think happened, to be honest with you. Then we talked about the medieval women who, had their own businesses and they did some studying, and some of them were educated, but they had influence in their sphere. They were midwives. Within their world, they had a lot of power, but they couldn't step out of the world for the most part. Then we talked about Asnat Barzani, the first woman rabbi who ran her husband's yeshiva, basically, because she made her father agree that she would never have to do housework. And Francesca Sara, the Kabbalist who was honored and respected by the other Kabbalists in Safat. We talked about her. And we talked about Hannah Rachel Verbermacher, the first Hasidic Rebbe, who had a brilliant vision of what God was in life, and she had a following, but again, the men, threatened to excommunicate her unless she gave it all up and got married. She got married and got divorced in a week, and then moved to Israel, and actually probably found acceptance again in the Safat community among the Kabbalists. So the Kabbalists, for their vision of life, of the soul being, transcending the body, gave them sort of an egalitarian view to some degree of men and women. They certainly respected women in their time, and women were as educated as men, were more than in other closed Jewish communities. Then we talked about the women of the Salon, the Salonier women who could not find their place in Judaism and left, but brought their education, their love for knowledge and culture with them and started these salons. Many of them converted because that was the only way to be accepted. They became bohemians, artists, writers, but they could not find their place in Judaism. And now we find Lillian Wald, who started out in a sort of sheltered, rich life of an upper middle class Jewish family. She was born in 1867, and that was just 2 years after the end of the Civil War. She lived in Cincinnati, and then they moved to Rochester, and her father was a businessman, but her grandfather was a doctor and sort of apparently, was founded New York Medical School, that had a dynasty, his family so medicine was in her family. She was very pampered as a child. This, I think, is important because her life choice is to live among the poorest of the poor. So she was very pampered as a child. She went to boarding school where they learned French and English. She was so brilliant that at 16, she applied to Vassar, but they said, oh, you're too young, come back. But instead, she ended up going to nursing school when she was 21 years old. She became a nurse, and then she decided to go to medical school. But then she had an experience that changed her mind. So I just want to admit somebody. Since she lived in the 20th century, in the early 20th century, we actually have a film. So I have a little movie about her life that we're going to start with. And so Hannah, take it away.
One rainy March morning, Lillian Wald, a 26-year-old nurse, was teaching a homemaking class to a group of immigrant women. Suddenly, a young girl burst in. She begged Wald to help her mother, who lay dying in a nearby tenement. Wald took her hand and rushed through the chaotic streets of the Lower East Side. They reached a squalid apartment. There, the girl's mother lay on a blood-soaked bed, hemorrhaging after childbirth, abandoned by her doctor because she could not pay his fee. Wald was shocked. The misery in the room and the walk through the gritty streets to reach it was, in her words, a baptism of fire. It changed how she saw the world and her purpose in it. It was a radical transformation for Lillian Wald. She had grown up in a well-to-do German Jewish family in Rochester, New York, raised to become a wife and mother. But Wald wanted more. Determined to do something about the poverty and misery she witnessed, Wald moved into a Lower East Side tenement in 1893 and began what she called public health nursing. It was the start of Henry Street settlement. Lillian Wald was part of a burgeoning social reform movement that emerged in the late 1800s in response to the intense poverty caused by rapid industrialization and urbanization. Among these progressives were members of the settlement house movement. They believed that by settling in a neighborhood, they could respond to the needs and challenges of the residents not just as reformers, but as neighbors. Like other settlements, Henry Street relied on affluent benefactors. One of Wald's earliest champions was Jacob Schiff, a wealthy uptown banker and philanthropist. In 1895, Schiff purchased a townhouse at 265 Henry Street in the heart of the Lower East Side to be the settlement's headquarters. From 265 Henry Street, settlement work radiated out. One focus was a visiting nurse service. The service expanded quickly. Several nurses became many, making thousands of house calls every year. As the nurses traveled throughout the city, they came to know its people and their problems intimately. Their insights informed another focus of the settlement: social work. Henry Street helped immigrants on the Lower East Side navigate their new world. The house at 265 Henry Street was abuzz with classes, clubs, and clinics. Children frolicked in the playground Wald built in the backyard. At night, it became a place for adults to socialize and labor organizers to meet. Wald believed in the power of the arts to nourish the soul and celebrate diversity. While many settlements urged immigrants to Americanize, Wald saw immigrants' cultures as something to embrace. Everyone was welcome at Henry Street, from the sweatshop worker to the wealthy banker. Henry Street's work quickly expanded into the national arena. Like other progressives, Wald believed it was imperative that the government take an active role in solving society's problems. She joined with settlement house heads, labor organizers, religious leaders, activists, and elected officials to create change. She saw squalid, crowded tenements and campaigned for housing regulations. She saw dismal working conditions and pushed for worker protections. She saw children working to help their families survive, unable to go to school, sick, hungry, and fought for child labor laws, school nurses, free school lunches, and special education classes. She saw rampant discrimination and fought for the rights of immigrants, women, and African Americans. When World War I broke out in 1914, she marched for peace. As a progressive reformer and settlement house leader, Lillian Wald created a blueprint for action that would guide Henry Street into the future. Wald believed that an organization created to serve the public must evolve with the public. As the fabric of the Lower East Side has changed, Henry Street has changed with it.
Henry Street made me want things for myself I didn't even know I could attain. And working at Henry Street has allowed me to take the opportunities they gave me and turn them into opportunities for others.
I grew up on Montgomery Street. I was a Henry Street camper and took piano, flute, and dance lessons. The settlement gave me the sense that I'm not alone in my neighborhood and that all of us should serve our community.
So what's interesting is this is as you see, it's a story about Lillian, and it's a sort of a promo about Henry Street. So they say she worked on these things, but we're gonna look at what I sent you. She started them. She started them in her 20s. She founded Henry Street Settlement House. It was her vision when she was 27 years old is when she started doing this. And she started this visiting nurses thing even earlier than that. It was the first visiting nurses organization in the world. If you ever watch Call the Midwife, you know, on PBS, well, those visiting nurses, that was in 1950. She was doing this in the late 1890s, early 1900s. They were doing visiting nursing because she saw how squalid everything was. So I'm going to share some of it. We're going to look at some of the information that is very interesting. Does anybody have any questions or would like to ask or comment on anything before I share the text? Anybody want to say anything? Had you heard of her, any of you?
Yes.
Oh, yes. I wanted to say one more thing that it's also in the text, but she was a lesbian. She was unmarried. She had a few relationships with women. Mainly her focus was her work, but I actually wrote a miniseries, a 5-hour miniseries on women from 1888, and it was about women's suffrage and women's rights, you know, from like the 1880s to the 1970s. And when I looked at this area of settlement work and progressives, the main women who worked for women's rights and children's rights were lesbians. And the reason was they were not tied down with the obligations of family and children. And don't forget, there was no birth control then, and women were having children. And actually, I learned that during this time, during the time of the first 4 years of Theodore Roosevelt, it was against the law to tell a woman about birth control. A doctor could lose his license for telling a woman, and we're talking about the rhythm method. We're not even talking, you know, like don't have sex in the middle of your cycle, nothing. They couldn't tell them because they wanted to grow the population of America, and they wouldn't let you do it. And she wasn't Jewish, but Margaret Sanger, Planned Parenthood was in the 1916 it started. It was in response to that. It was women have a right to know and plan their parenting, their motherhood. They shouldn't be, you know, that her thing was to just tell you how to prevent getting pregnant if you didn't want to. And we were talking about women dying in childbirth, women who were in poverty, were having, you know, 6 children, 8 children, and had no idea how to stop it. So, Lillian Wald also fought for birth control. That was one of her causes, and women's suffrage, women's votes. Don't forget, women had no vote till 1919 or 1921. I always can't remember. I think 1921. They didn't have the vote. So she was fighting not just for. She was fighting for. It started because the Lower East Side was predominantly Jewish, and she always identified as a Jewish woman. I mean, she wasn't necessarily practicing, but she always identified as a Jewish woman. You saw that Rabbi Stephen Wise was one of her supporters. So I want to just share some stuff with you. So where's the share? Share screen. Hold on. Oh, this one. Okay. Share. So where is everybody now? Okay. So I wanted to point out, how do I move this up? This particular information we saw it visually, but this is pretty interesting information about the Lower East Side at that time. So who would like to read just this paragraph? Somebody?
Oh, I will.
Okay.
Okay, I have it printed here.
Okay.
The Lower East Side was an incredibly diverse and densely populated area. At the time that Wald was working there, it was also home to a large Jewish immigrant population. In fact, if the Lower East Side was its own city, it would have been the largest Jewish city in the 19th century. Many of these families lived in tenement housing, low-rise, cheaply built apartment buildings. Because rents were low, they were the housing choice for many newly arrived immigrants. And it was not unusual for a family of 10 to live in a 325 square foot apartment. That's incredible. Because of the cramped quarters and lack of upkeep of the buildings, many tenement residents were frequently sick.
So that is, you know, the situation that she saw. And what I love about her is she didn't say, oh my God, this is terrible. She said, I have to change this. And I think, you know, we've looked at I feel like she's the heir to all of the women we've talked about over the centuries who've said, I need to make a difference. I need to change this. I need to act. I can't just wring my hands and think it's terrible. And she was a rich young woman she didn't have to do that. And the settlement house idea, which I didn't really realize what it meant you settled in the neighborhood where you worked. So if you were serious, so she gave up, you know, all her riches basically, or put it into this, and lived in a tenement or in some, you know, apartment like everybody else. So, I mean, her idea, she coined the term public health nurse to describe those who worked. And she advocated nursing in public schools. And she started the first public nursing organization in the world. And she was the president of the National Organization for Public Health Nursing. And she helped found the Columbia University School of Nursing, this one woman. And I was looking this up. In 1894 is when she started it. She was 27 years old. And she was like, her vision was unbelievable. And she got all of these richer Jews, and particularly Jacob Schiff, to, you know, help her fund it. And so let's just read this, her vision. Who would like to read this? Oh my God, I just ruined this. Wait, hold on. Let me fix this. This goes here. Okay. Who would like to just read this paragraph here? This one. Somebody. Merle?
In 1894, is that where it starts?
Yeah. Or okay, Lori, yeah.
Oh, okay.
In 1894, Wald and Brewster started the Henry Street Settlement House, an organization dedicated to providing social services and instruction in various subjects up for the Lower East Side community. Wald's vision for Henry Street was one unlike any others at the time. Wald believed that every New York City resident was entitled to equal and fair health care, regardless of their social status, socioeconomic status, race, gender, and age.
So we don't even have that today.
Right.
Go ahead.
She argued that everyone should have access to at-home care. A strong advocate for adequate bedside manner, Wald believed that regardless of if a person could afford at-home care, they deserved to be treated with the same level of respect that some who could afford it would be.
So this vision of this, everyone is entitled to health care, that's considered socialist. We see there were progressive thinkers, you know, 125 years ago, and we still haven't been able to achieve that. And if you look here, in 1913, they had 7 buildings on Henry Street, 3,000 members in classes, clubs, and 92 nurses making 200,000 home health calls a year. And she also, and a little later they talk more about it, she believed, you know, in equal rights for Negroes, and she was a founding member of the NAACP, and she gave the settlement house as a place where they could have their meetings. And so she was like so instrumental, this one woman. She also, if you look at this, she provided opportunities for women to work, training as nurses, training as social workers, and to give women independence to have their own money in a time when you got married, all of your property belonged to your husband, or, you know, this is a time when they could make their own salaries. This is what else she did. I mean, I can't believe how much she did, this one woman. So I'd like someone to read this about what else she did. Who else would like to read that?
the paragraph, the community outreach and advocacy?
Yeah, right.
Okay. Wald also taught women how to cook and sew, provided recreational activities for families, and was involved in the labor movement. Out of her concern for women's working conditions, she helped to found the Women's Trade Union League in 1903, and later served as a member of the executive committee of the New York League. In 1910, Wald and several colleagues went on a 6-month tour of Hawaii, Japan, China, Russia, a trip that increased her involvement in worldwide humanitarian issues. In 1915, Wald founded the Henry Street Neighborhood Playhouse. She was an early leader in the Child Labor Committee, which became the National Child Labor Committee. The group lobbied federal child labor laws and promoted childhood education. In the 1920s, the organization proposed an amendment to the U.S. Constitution that have banned child labor. Excuse me. In the 1920s, Wald owned the social welfare initiatives of New York Governor Al Smith, and in 1928, she actively supported Smith's presidential campaign,
which he lost. And we know that I said she was an activist for African Americans, and she believed that all Henry Street classes be racially integrated. That is unbelievable in 1910 and 1905 to have, racial integration in classes. This was her vision of treating all people the same way. And then they talk about her, personal life, that she was with women mainly. And she died when she was 73 years old of a cerebral hemorrhage. And here a rabbi conducted her memorial service. And a few months later at Carnegie Hall, 2,000 people gathered to a tribute to Wald, which had messages from the President of the United States, the governor, and the mayor, governor of New York State, and the mayor of New York City. So she was a giant in terms of social welfare, not just for Jews, but for all people. And I talked about all this stuff, that she was in the Children's Bureau, the Trade League. And then also they said that she opposed World War I, but then she became the chairman of the Committee on Community Nursing of the American Red Cross, and chaired the Red Cross's campaign against the Spanish flu epidemic.
Wow.
So here's her legacy that, we need to know about. The New York Times in 1922 called her one of the 12 greatest living American women. And she received the Lincoln Medallion for her work as an outstanding citizen of New York. And then she died, as I said, in 73, where people came and honored her. In 1937, when for her 70th birthday, this is 3 years before she died, Miss Franklin Delano Roosevelt's mother read a letter from her son praising her for her unselfish labor to promote the happiness and well-being of others. And she was elected to the Hall of Fame of Great Americans in 1970. And in 1993, she was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. And there are houses named for her in Manhattan. So she was an incredible woman that, okay, I'm going to close this share. So I want to ask you, we looked at all the, first of all, does anybody have any comments about this or anything they want to say about her? Yes, Merle.
So I have a lot of family in New York, one that owns well-known restaurants, and others are in retail as well as fabric manufacturing. And they, over about the last 8 or 9 years, have all volunteered to teach cooking or fabricating or how to get a job in certain industries. So I've been aware of it, but I never knew who she was. I just knew that they spend a lot of time volunteering in whatever way they can in some of the programs at the settlement.
At the Henry Street settlement, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, right. It was.
In fact, one of their daughters did her bat mitzvah program.
Wow.
Volunteering there.
Right. I mean, it's still there. It's one of the most, well-known places in the Lower East Side of New York. And I actually had a play produced there at one point. The Neighborhood Playhouse, which is pretty famous, was started there, as they said. So I'm curious now of all the, how have learning about these women, has it impacted on your own sense of self as a Jewish woman? And are there particular women that inspire you or you identify with or have strengthened your sense of self as a Jewish woman from all the different women that we have been talking about? Nothing? I can't believe nothing. None of these women.
No, it's given me more to speak out, even to those who I know don't agree with me. It's family members who have very different opinions than the majority of our family. I think in a lot of cases, it's just allowed me to just say what's on my mind, and I don't care how they feel.
Okay. Any other, how has learning about this, has it changed you, affected you, inspired you, pushed you in any way? I mean, your sense of self, your sense of Jewish women, anything at all? Yes, Susan, Janelle.
Hi. So I didn't participate in most of these. I think it was one, I did one other one maybe. But two things that jumped out at me. One, which is unfortunately not that much has changed in the terms of the woman we just talked about. The problems are the same. It's over 100 years later, and it's just astounding to me that the same exact things are happening. Another one is, why don't we, collective we, know more about the woman who did these things? Why is it not out there? Maybe, bless you, Nan. Maybe if you studied women's studies in college, maybe you would have learned about it. I didn't. I didn't learn about it. So I just think it's very interesting. I'm sure there's lots of men we don't know about either, but it seems to be more prevalent that we don't know about the women.
Exactly. And so I think it's incumbent for us to know about them, talk about them, teach them. Oh, Jennifer, you had your hand up.
Oh, yeah. Oh, thanks, Rabbi Nanus. Thanks to everybody. What I've learned too is, again, how many women's lives so enriching and enthralling, and how many of them are only being unveiled now, and the silence is being penetrated by voices like yours and on college campuses, across the country. So, and I think I would say also that it's not only because, I haven't known about them and shrouded in a kind of secrecy for many reasons. I would that I find these lives so motivating. It's not just because they've been buried. Had they been known, I'd still be in.
You lost her.
Oh, hello? We lost you. I want to tell you something that happened to me. So when I was 21 and I graduated college, all the girls around me were getting married or they were engaged. And I did not know a single woman. Now, this is me. I lived in Chicago, and Chicago is always, the Midwest is always more behind the coasts in terms of thinking, I find, East and West. I didn't know a single woman over 25, and we called them girls then, who was unmarried. And I had no idea who I was if I didn't get married, what would happen to me, what I was supposed to do. There was no information in school from the women, my grandmothers, was all about, I used to say, my grandmother, who I love dearly, loved me, she'd say, you see this china? This is yours when you get married. You see this silver? This is yours. You see this ring? This is yours when you get married. And I was like, I was nothing until I got married. And so I was at Yale, my first year at Yale. I went to the Yale library and I read like 30 books about women from other countries and other cultures. I said, what is a woman? Who is a, what am I? Who am I? And I learned, wow, you could be a lot of things. There were a lot of different kinds of women in the world. There were leaders, there were artists, there were activists, there were, there was many, and it comforted me so much. I actually think that most young women today still are trapped in a very narrow self-definition. Even though, yeah, you can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer, which you couldn't be then, but you still should be married, you still should have kids, you still should make a certain amount of money, you should still live in a certain way, you should have a house by a certain time, and I'm sure men are trapped in some of those things too. But I think when we read about these women, even in 2,000 years ago, who were saying, I'm smart, I'm going to study Talmud, I don't care, you know what I mean? Or I know as much as these men, I'm going to be a religious leader. I mean, so these are the women that, the Jewish women that we know about, or the Kabbalists, that they got respect. And so I think for me, when I read in Lillian Wald, one woman, oh my God, what she did, what she said is not acceptable. I think we don't even realize our own potential. I think we don't realize our own possibilities. And we need our daughters and granddaughters to know about these possibilities. So that's my reaction. So I'm curious if you agree, disagree, Nadine?
Agree. And I totally agree with what Susan said, that here we are and not enough has changed, very little. I mean, I think what this reading about these women has done for me is to create a kind of this big picture frame, and a lot of things that I'm reading now or watching now kind of fit into that frame. So we just started watching the third season of Shtisel. And, one of the characters goes to the gynecologist. The gynecologist picks up the phone and calls her husband. Nothing can happen without the man knowing. And you think back to these times, or you read, I can't think of the name. So many novels that I'm reading now. They're really all about this. Read the Torah, all about this. Listen to the news, look at what senators and congressmen do to women. And it is inspiring, and it's a good reminder, I think, for us to remember that we have voices, and we don't always have to listen to men, except we're going to have a fight along the way if we choose not to do that.
Well, so you have a fight.
Right. No, I know.
Men back down pretty quickly if you fight. They're not so powerful. It's an illusion. And speaking up is not that scary. And you know what? It's like anything else. The more you speak up, the less difficult it becomes. I mean, I've learned, I have a big mouth now. I didn't have it in my 20s. I worked on it, and I will not be, academically, socially, or emotionally bullied. It's not physical bullying that we get. It's that other kind of bullying. Natalie, did you have your hand up? And then everybody will get a chance. You're muted.
Of course, what we're saying, that women should have the freedom, especially women who are brilliant and have felt they've been stuck in a little box. However, I must really say about everything in life is a balance. And when you disturb one thing, whether it's for the good of what you think at the moment, you disturb the other thing. And I've been watching Shtisel also. And of course, this group of people is very far from the way I live my life. But even with that extreme Jewish community, I see the value in family and a structure and a power structure, and there are rules and regulations. So what I'm saying is that, yes, there are many women who have given up being wives and mothers and family centered for great careers, whatever they may be. And they get to be 40 years old and they realize that they don't have all the other things that their mother was teaching them to go out and have. So yes, you have the freedom. I'm not saying no to that. I just don't think you can look at it totally one way without seeing the balance. That what people have given up, they have gotten other things for.
So I'm going to let people respond, but I think what I'm saying, Natalie, is there shouldn't be a stigma.
Oh, absolutely.
If you choose an alternative way. I mean, I'm not saying you have to, I'm just saying that there shouldn't be a sense of you're a failure. And by the way, I adopted and became a mother at 43. So
fine. No, I didn't. I don't know anything about your personal life. I was not referring to any.
No, I know that, but I'm saying you can't.
I know. All I was saying is everyone should have the freedom with what you just said, but sometimes with that freedom, though, the balance, you've given something else up that is precious and important.
You can't have it all.
But in most things you read, and in this woman who talked about novels and TV and this, it's only one-sided. It's only one-sided. And so that's all I'm saying is that all those mothers who wanted their children to get married and have children, they were looking in a way to protect them more than anything else, which may not have worked out well.
Okay.
But there was a point.
Susan, and then Abby, and then Laurie. Okay. Susan.
So I'm going to be a naysayer and speaking out. I don't think things haven't changed. For goodness sake, look at all the women in politics now. Look at the women in medical school. There are more women and in universities. There are more women now than men. There are more women in medical schools and in law school. And my granddaughter's going to law school. So for people to say things haven't changed, of course they've changed. And when I was in academia, there were more women there than men. Now, and it wasn't just nursing and education. And there were more women in the cabinet as well. I mean, in our current political situation. I watched the Seder from the White House, and it was inspiring. They had people in the administration. First of all, Sharon Brous led it, who's another woman rabbi.
From LA.
What?
From LA.
Yeah, and from LA, because she's Emhoff's rabbi there. But it was inspiring the women that are in key positions and in the cabinet too. And to say it hasn't changed is looking with blinders, I think,
I agree.
that it's not enough.
I think the things that hasn't changed are societal ills, not women's.
Societal
ills are still, there's still hunger, there's still no health care, there's still bad housing, there's that in that respect. But I think
that's what I was talking about.
I knew that.
That's what I was talking about.
I knew she was talking about.
You're absolutely right with that, but they have changed for women.
Yes, they have for sure. Okay, so who did I say was next? I said Abby. Abby, yeah. Well,
Hi.
Chance.
Yeah, I'd like to change. I mean, I was away a bit, so I don't know if people mentioned it, but to me, and I only saw 2 programs, but it seems to me that women, to be able to do stuff, had to leave their Jewish background. And,
at one time, no longer though.
But even Lillian Wald, she wasn't Jewish. The other women that we talked about, they also sort of had to not only do things again that were not current in their society, but they also had to leave their Jewish background.
Well, some of them were rabbis, but I don't think Lillian Wald left her Judaism. She was probably a Reformed Jew. And to be honest with you, starting a settlement house and doing all that is one of the most Jewish things you can do.
It's a mitzvah.
Absolutely.
It's absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's her Judaism. That
Right,
and whether or
right.
not she had celebrated Passover, we don't even know because she
Well,
had
so
rabbis. Yeah.
Well, but I know that I when I had been learning elsewhere, I said there's two parts to being a good Jew. You need to do mitzvah, and you need to do the religious part also. You cannot just be.
Who said that?
I don't remember, but it was another.
I don't agree.
Okay, so the thing is, so anyone who does good things, are they then Jewish?
I think if you acknowledge that this is part of your belief system and it comes from a Jewish tradition, and this is how I am practicing my Judaism, I know that it's part of Jew, and I see a lot of people saying the teachings for me are tikkun olam. That's how I'm a Jew. And I personally, if it's a choice between, keeping kosher or doing tikkun olam, I'd rather you ate all the pork in the world and did tikkun olam and did good deeds. But you know what the great thing about Judaism is, there's multiple opinions about it, and no matter what you do, no one's kicking you out.
No one's kicking you out.
No one's kicking you out. Okay, Laura.
I was just going to say that I agree that you can't have it all, but you can have it all in stages. You just can't have it all at the same time.
Right.
So if you are a woman who does get married and has a career and then starts having children, she may have to take limited years away from her legal or medical practice to raise her children, but maybe not. And you can still continue to, once your children are, settled in school, whatever, a lot of women do that. I have lots of role models in my own generation that I can point to who actually seem to be doing it all, but sometimes in stages.
I just want to say, and then I'm going to call on Sue and then Nadine. If you could say, one of the bonuses of this pandemic has been to show that people can work at home and have a family, and maybe this is going to now have flex time for mothers.
I hope so.
I feel like suddenly you can't say, oh, it's not possible. We've been doing it for a year. And there's going to be a lot more accommodation, I think, made for mothers because of this. Susan Cuss.
I went to high school in Los Angeles. My class was about 250 people. It was a winter class, almost 90% Jewish. No one, and I'm still active in the alumni group, no woman from my group became an attorney or a doctor. I wanted to go to medical school, and my father said to me, this is a quote, he says, oh, you can't go to medical school because you're going to take up the place of a man that has to earn a living and support a family, and you're going to go and you're going to get married and have children. Now, I didn't have to listen to him. I think the biggest change today is that if a father said that to a daughter, she'd say, what are you talking about? I think that parents today want their kids to make choices, to have opportunities, and so forth. The other thing I would say is that I think men, their roles in the family have changed too. I know my stepson, he takes time off to go to his kids' soccer games.
Yeah.
During the workday, he manages his work life so he can do that. And so I think that it's not just a change in attitude. I agree with Susan, things have changed, but I think part of it is that women now, they say, hey, I want to do this and I'm going to follow my passion. I think that women in my era, we didn't follow our passion. We didn't conceive of having a passion.
You could hardly even get into it.
We conceived of having children and getting married.
But you couldn't barely get into medical school. I mean,
right.
it was
right.
not, there were so many obstacles. Okay, Nadine, where are you?
I'm here.
Oh, Nadine, yeah.
Well, I just wanted to respond and say, I think, yes, there has been a great deal of change. There's no question about it, but it is so slow.
Still hard.
It is
Still hard.
It is still there. It is so slow. It's really the same thing with feminism, racism. You still have the white Anglo-Saxon male, Protestant male, whatever, however you want to say it, shrieking its last geschries as these things change and we have more equality. But it is slow, and we still have to think about it. We still have to think, damn it, when is a woman going to be president of the United States?
Right.
Maybe next time. Okay. I used to think I would see it in my lifetime. I'm not so sure now. So yes, there's a huge amount of change, and all for the better, but it's slow.
It's slow.
I'd also like to see a Jewish president.
You got a vice president,
Well, okay, wait, before I call in Merle, anyone who hasn't spoken like to say, Jennifer and then Merle. Yeah, Jennifer.
Hey, I hope, I'm so sorry, my phone died right in the middle of when I was, saying how grateful I was and that these women's lives have been a revelation, and not just because they've been hidden. They truly have taught and elevated, I'm sure, all of us. And then I just wanted to add, one thing I noticed having taught piano for so many years is when I would get students who were, say between 50, 60, and there have been many others who older, even who were women, they put so much pressure on themselves in a way that the men, adult beginners, didn't. And the reason they said for this was because as children, as little girls, the piano lessons were given to the boys.
Really?
Not them. They chose the boys. If you were a girl and the boy wanted the lessons, and parents had only so much money. So consequently, as adults, they felt this tremendous responsibility and a starting point of that they weren't good enough.
Well, I teach adult B'nai Mitzvah, and it's mainly women, because all of these women, when they were girls, were said, your brother can have a bar mitzvah, but you don't need one. You don't need one. There's no need for it. And I think about my grandmother, who was brilliant, and she wasn't allowed to go to high school, get a job. At 14, it was like, no, you've had enough schooling, get a job. And my mother, her daughter, went to college because it was so important to her. So all right. So Merle, you wanted to say something.
No, I think what we have to do, those of us who are, for lack of better terminology, progressive, and do the things that we do, and our husbands allow it and do it as well.
Wait, our husbands what?
Where our husbands allow us to do what we are, we just do it, however you want to say it. I think what concerns me is I see a lot of people my age and younger, women and men, who still don't feel that they're still living in the dark ages, that they don't think that women should be out doing these things, or should be saying what they say, or should be out there and being outspoken. And that disturbs me, is there are still people who feel we all be, shut up and be housewives and raise our children. It's disturbing.
And it's in a lot of the world,
and it's frightening
for sure.
Right. And it's frightening that, Arnie had a cousin who still lives in another world and doesn't understand how our family, even back to my grandparents, encouraged us to be outspoken and do what people are finally doing now. That's the part that disturbs me, is how do we educate those who are living in way back in the past?
Well, I think what we I think, and then I'm like, Penina and Susan, right after you, just want to say, I think one of the enlightening things about this, even in these 6 weeks, is that that's not the way it used to be. Oh, that's how women always were. This is the way it is. It's not the way it is. There were women in every century and every generation who were not that way, who were educated, who I'm not talking about outspoken, but they followed a different path. Right. They, wanted to be equal and realize their talents. And so they didn't live in a box. And so we shouldn't think that this is the way women are. This is our nature. It's not our nature at all. And it never was. Nina, you're muted. You're still muted. Okay.
How about now?
Yeah, good.
Okay. Well, I think my story is a little funny. I was born in Israel. My father was a Greek Jew, and they believe in honor, honor, honor. And yet, when I was 15 and I wanted to go to high school, he said, go get a job.
Wow.
Go to night school. And I went and got a job in an office that was distributing and selling fertilizers to the farms and to the kibbutzim and even to the Arab settlements. Anyhow, so I went to work, and at 16 I met my husband, and at 18 I was married, and my husband was already pretty well kind of like he saved, and we bought a condo, and everything was good. And then we came to America. I was already pregnant with my son. He became a carpenter, and he was working on houses, and then one day decided to go to night school and learn how to read blueprints. And my cousin told us, we have a lot in Beechwood that we want to sell. You want to buy it? So I said, okay. And we saved up like, I don't know how much it was at the time. I think 10,000. She bought it for 6. And we bought a lot, and we decided to build a house. And we went to visit a lot for a year till finally my husband got the courage to start building it. And he used to bring his buddies to help build the house. So somebody knocked on the door after the house was up. And they asked us how much, if we want to sell it. And I said, how much? And they said 75,000. And I knew that the house cost us maybe 54. So my husband came home and I said, you know what, Josh, you're buying another lot. Because we can.
So what does this have to do with it?
Yeah, I tell you. So then we became, both of us became a company, a building company. And he built many, many beautiful homes. And my name was up there. It was P&J Builders, Penina and Josh. And when we chose a name, the kids were jumping up and down because everything was taken. And when we said, how about P&J? They said, oh, the Pajama Builders. And they were all excited. And we started building. And then he died. And I kept the company going. And there was a lot of beautiful homes that he built.
You've got mail.
Then I'll try to make it fast. After he passed away, I kept the company open, and my patio in the back was broken. And it was a concrete one, and it was on a slope. And I hired somebody to come and fix it. And somebody, maybe my neighbor, told the city that there is construction going on in the backyard. So an inspector came. And he asked,
what does this have to do with it?
You wait and wait.
Okay,
wait.
But it's
so when he saw a woman, he figured out that maybe I'm doing something and there is no oversee. So he asked me, who is the general contractors here? Just because I was a woman, he asked me, who is the general contractor? And I said, me. So he said, you need a permit. I said, okay. And believe me, I never went to get a permit. So I went into the city hall and I told them that I am the general contractor and I wanted to build this deck. And I had all the plan that I made and everything. And I had to bring a copy, and I went.
Okay, but what's the
and
point?
I got the permit. So the girls in the office there were cheering me up. And I said, I'm 78 years old and I'm only just starting. And they were so happy. And they were like, go, Knick.
That's a good story because it shows that even though you were held down, you found a way to succeed and become a partner.
Not only that, they couldn't believe that I could be the general contractor.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to just close with Susan Ehrlich. You
I'm
had
trying to remember what I was going to say. That shows for.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you all for this great.
But I think what it was for Merle, that I think some of it is the people who think differently or feel differently. I've come to the point in this older age. Younger, I would be very upset with people who were not on the same way. But in my own family, there are different lifestyles, and I've come to respect it. You know, my sister became Chabad, and there are many things in her family that I think are beautiful, and the Chabad movement that are beautiful, and I can't put it down. It's different. And then others in the family are of a different political persuasion as I am, and we just don't talk about politics, you know, but we find other areas to connect. So I think that, and I respect the diversity and learn to find out what is good in their various ways. And I don't think it's always good to be very verbal and outspoken. There's such a thing as shalom bayit, peace in the house. And I often have to do that. Not enough, but to keep peace and say, am I going to really, what's more important, to criticize this or to have it?
Well, I don't think outspoken necessarily means criticize. It sometimes means just having the right to your own voice. I mean,
yes, that I agree.
But I think what we can conclude from this is there are many ways to be a woman. There are many ways to be a Jewish woman, and we have wonderful role models in our history to lead the way for us, no matter if we're religious, we're spiritual, we're progressive and social, we're going to be in our own sphere, like the women of the medieval times who found a way within their families to, you know, fulfill themselves. So there are many ways. They're all valid. They're all beautiful. And I thank you for taking this journey with me.
Thank you. This has been a great series. Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye, everyone.
All of you.
Thank you, Susan. This has been a fabulous series.
Thank you.
It is. What are you going to do next? Oh, she left.
Oh, she's gone.
She's gone. She's not answering. It would be great what she does next.
Susan?
Yes.
Oh, did she leave?
Yeah, she left.
Oh, Rabbi. Okay, Rabbi says. Okay. I was going to say something.